Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Former Nice Guys podcast. Before we get started, I want to let you know that you can support the show by going over to jkramergraphics.com and picking up an item. We also do discounts for group orders, so if you're looking, your unit, your business, whatever, is looking to do a large purchase, reach out and I'll send you a discount code. That allows you to also let everyone order individually. That way you're not stuck like collecting money, making rosters for sizes, colors, and all the other stuff. You know, that's the worst part about it. I remember doing it when I was in. Also, we offer free shipping on orders of $75 or more. And as always, if you're looking for a custom design for your unit, then reach out and we can facilitate that as well. So again, support the show. Go over to jkramergraphics.com and let's get to it.
We had the Regimental Reconnaissance Detachment. Today it's the Regimental Reconnaissance Company, and they their job was to do recon for the Ranger Regiment, and they kind of worked themselves out of a job in the sense that they got sucked up into JSOC and started doing operations for them. So that left the battalions without any sort of reconnaissance element, and to rectify that, they created battalion reconnaissance platoons.
Mm-hmm.
So this was a brand new capability for the battalions, and this was their first deployment. Deploying, like you said earlier, that it was kind of a throwback to LRRPs in the sense that these guys would work in 5-6 man teams, with a JTAC, maybe with a sniper, and they would act as scouts. They could go out and low visibility vehicles, disguised as Afghan people or soldiers or whatever the case may be, or do aerial reconnaissance, whatever really needed to be done to get out there and do recon on targets for Rangers.
That sounds like an awesome job, to be honest. You know, that's like a lot of people, I think, when they think of recon or reconnaissance, of some dude in a ghillie suit laying in a bush, you know, and it's way more than that, especially nowadays, like you talked about in Afghanistan, where you got people going out and intermingling with the local populace and stuff, you know, unknown to them. Was that ever something you considered doing or wanted to do? And is that an extra, like, NDOC or anything to get into that, or how does that work?
I'm pretty sure that they do now have their own selection and their own training course and everything. I'm sure it's much more advanced now that they've matured that capability since it was first stood up, you know, a long time ago now. Like we're talking like 15 years ago.
Yeah, for sure.
It wasn't something that I necessarily thought about doing per se, just because I was a new sniper at the time. So I was still learning the ropes at my own job.
Yeah. Definitely. Now that you've gone and been to Afghanistan, like you said, you joined, you know, initially you were going to join the French Foreign Legion because you just wanted to get into a combat unit. Now you've had that taste of it. You've been there. You've done that. You've gone into the great unknown, you know. What was your kind of thought process afterwards? Did it seem like, was it what you thought it would be? Was it worth it to you? I mean, obviously you went back.
Honestly, it was a dream come true. I was exactly where I wanted to be, doing exactly what I wanted to do. Getting to roll out on combat operations with a highly trained, motivated force like the Rangers. It was absolutely amazing. You know, I had some great leaders. I had, you know, with my sniper partner, some great training. I was under the wings of some really good guys. We had the best equipment. We had the best helicopters. So, I mean, it was an amazing experience. It really was.
You can't really... Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and also just being in such a remote, austere location like Afghanistan, at times it feels like you're on another planet.
Yeah, for sure. At times it definitely does. It is an interesting place. I try to like convey some of the things you see in Afghanistan. It's just like you can't really understand it, some of the stuff, unless you've been there and you've seen... You know, we always say there's like, when I was on the advisor team, there's an Afghan solution to an Afghan problem. You know, that it doesn't matter if that's what was made or designed to fix that issue. They will work it some way to make it work. It's just how their people are. Seeing the craziest looking vehicles drive down the road that are pieced together from probably 30 other vehicles. Yeah, Afghanistan's an interesting place for sure. I'm sitting here thinking about that, and I totally forgot the question I was going to ask you. You know, being at Ranger Battalion and other units like that, where there's a high expectation of individual performance, and there's a sense of people that just want to be there, is a different world than being in, like, I'm assuming, the big army. I know in the big Marine Corps, working in these small specialized teams and doing those missions was way more fulfilling for me, when I was with Anglico doing stuff with those guys, than being at, like, I was a mechanic, when I first came in the Marine Corps. There was two different levels of, like, this is really cool, I'm in the Marine Corps. And what was the Marine Corps? Did you guys have that same kind of feeling? Like, you can appreciate, like, hey, everyone that's here wants to be here. Everyone here is trying their hardest to be good at their job.
Yeah. And I hate to use, like, such a kind of cliched metaphor, but it's kind of like you're with modern day samurai, right? They're like, they're making an art form into what they do. They're trying to be the best at every little single task that they're given. So it's just an incredible environment to be in. And I can safely say, I was average. I was an average guy. It's on a relative scale, I guess. I was in an elite unit, but I was just an average guy in a elite unit. And I was very fortunate to be able to work around that kind of caliber of soldier.
For sure. And, that was kind of my whole point in starting this podcast. It was, there's so many, like, normal dudes, you see walking down the street that you would never know unless they told their story, the things that they've seen or done. One of the first guys I interviewed, I bring this story up a few times on here. His name's Jerry. My neighbor told me about him, and I'd seen this guy walking down the street a few times, and I thought he was just some beach bum because I lived in the Oceanside right next to the beach, and I thought this was some old beach bum. He'd always seen with his shades and a big hat on. And he's like, yeah, he was in the Marines. He was a fighter pilot. You should talk to him. He's like, I know you got that podcast. You should hit him up. And I was like, all right, man. So he introduces me, and turns out this dude is like 98% blind. He's like walking to and from the beach, barely even able to see. And he went blind because he was doing a bombing run in Vietnam and got shot down, and the canopy, like, busted through the windshield and blinded him as he ejected. And I'm like, dude, like, that's exactly what I'm talking about. No one would ever know that story, like, unless you told that. And it's unfortunate he doesn't really talk about it. He has a group of pilot friends, and they're the only ones that know their own stories because they have, like, an email chain. All these old Vietnam vet pilot dudes that stay in touch with each other. And I'm like, man, you guys really need to get these stories out because it's history. It's very important. And everyone has done more than somebody and less than somebody else, and I think too many people get wrapped around, like, what did I do in the military compared to what these other people did,
Yeah. And, we all served, like, our own little small part, and I think it's good to record all of those experiences. And a lot of those guys who they have the most insane stories, they're the least apt to talk about them. And you kind of have to pry them out of it. But, I do, I'm maybe this is a self-serving statement to some extent, but I think that what I do, what you do, there are a few others out there as well who have similar podcasts. And it's not really about, like, tooting my own horn. It's about allowing other people to tell their stories and hopefully inform and educate the next generation.
Yeah, for sure. And, and speaking of informing and educating, when you came back from that first deployment, you probably had a whole group of new guys, right? Was it up to you to start training these guys, or were you still considered a new guy? I mean, the deployments are a little bit shorter than what I'm used to, so I don't know how the vibe is in the Ranger Battalion.
I was still relatively junior, but the way things worked out, I did end up taking a fire team in Weapons Squad, 1st Platoon, over in ACO. And yes, I had new guys assigned. Now it's my responsibility to show them how things are supposed to work.
It's such a crazy concept because you were probably 22 or so at the time, and now you're in charge of, like, teaching these people how to survive in a combat situation, or, like, hey, this is the most efficient way to kill a dude. Like, just to think in the military, it's like, whatever, that's just, whatever, that's the job. But outside of the military, it's hard for me to imagine, like, regular people understanding that kind of thought process where you're like, hey, if I get smoked in the face, I need you to step up and grab the radio and take over,
Yeah. 21-year-olds leading 18-year-olds. And, it's, when you put it in that context, it's kind of horrifying, right?
Right.
But it's also, best job in the Army. Yeah. I mean, best job in the world. And it's incredibly gratifying. as intimidating as it is at times to have that much responsibility dumped on you as a young person, it's a really important formative experience to have.
For sure. And I honestly think that that level of responsibility given to someone, and I don't know, I think that is why a lot of people have an issue when they get out of the military, because everything else just kind of seems like bullshit now. You know, after you've done something that's like you're riding the edge constantly, you know, and at any time you could be killed, something could happen. It's dangerous. Like, it's inherently dangerous. No matter how many safeties you put into play, you're still dropping a live bomb on something, you know, something bad could happen. And then you get out, now it's like, hey, I'm a insurance salesman, you know, or whatever you choose to do. It's like, I understand why a lot of guys have issues after they get out, and it's like they don't feel like they're fulfilling the most that they could be, you know.
Especially in war, where every single decision you make, everything you do is so important, and there's so much riding on it. And now, I mean, today, the worst thing that happened was we were in the middle of this interview and my computer shut down to do an automatic update, and it interrupted our interview. Worst thing that happened to me today. I can't believe it. But I mean, really, just the stakes are so much lower. Just reset the computer, get it back up, and we're good to go. And yeah, I think absolutely so many of us, including myself, you know, struggle with those things. Not so much anymore, but in that transition out of the military, it was difficult.